There are a lot of men who have coached in the 100-year history of the National Hockey League, but no one has more victories than William Scott Bowman. No one has more Stanley Cup victories as a coach than Scotty. In fact, as a coach, general manager, or executive, Scotty has been a part of 14 Stanley Cup-winning teams, an astonishing record of success. What made Scotty so good, so special? Well, there is no one in the hockey world better able to answer that question than the man who tended goal for Scotty's Montreal Canadiens in the 1970s and has 6 cups to his name as well. Hall of Famer Ken Dryden, whose new book, Scotty, A Hockey Life Like No Other, explains his former coach's brilliance. And we are delighted to welcome Ken Dryden back to TVO. So good to see you.
Thanks, Steve.
I understand you've got a bit of a frog in your throat, so we're going to do the best we can here, okay? I know you're suffering a bit there. Yeah. How is it possible, let's start here, how is it possible that a guy who won 5 Stanley Cups with the Montreal Canadiens and grew up in Verdun, Quebec, started life as a Boston Bruins fan?
Well, I think it's the magic of radio. And so he would have discovered the Boston Bruins broadcasts when he was about 6 years old. And just at the time when the Bruins were the best team in the NHL and would be the Stanley Cup champions that year. And games at that time would start at about 8:30 at night. And so he would listen to the first period on the radio. And then his father, in the morning, his father would leave for work before Scotty was up to go to school. But he would leave on the kitchen table a little note with the score of the game and the goal scorers. And so that was his first favorite team, those Bruins that won in, I think, 39 and in 41.
He played hockey as a young kid and growing up and was not what you'd call like a surefire prospect to be in the NHL, but he was good enough and might have had a shot except for a tragedy that happened early in his life. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, he was playing Junior A with the Montreal Junior Canadiens. It was the playoffs, and they were playing Trois-Rivières, and they were on the verge of knocking out Trois-Rivières. And it was near the end of a game. It was a lopsided game, and Scotty got a breakaway. And the best player for Trois-Rivières was a defenseman named Jean-Guy Talbot. And Talbot was in his final year of junior and was angry, upset, and everything. And as he was trying to chase Scotty down, he hit him over the head with a stick. And
no helmets in those days.
No helmets, and he suffered a fractured skull. And that was effectively the end of his career. He tried to play a little bit and did the following year, but he went from a possible prospect to a non-prospect.
We're going to fast forward a little bit here. He's selling paint for Sherwin-Williams, if you can imagine, when he befriends a guy by the name of Sam Pollock. Who was Sam Pollock, and how did that change Scotty's life?
Well, I think it was one of those things that if you, later in your life, if you look back on those things that were the transformational moments, I think that would be in Scotty's top 2 or 3. And Sam Pollock was about 10 years older than Scotty, maybe not quite 10, but had a bit of a similar background. I mean, that Sam was a player in baseball and in hockey, small, not good enough to be a potential NHL player, but who early on decided to become an organizer. And this was just after World War II, and when it was the time for NHL teams, and especially those in Canada, which would have been the Leafs and the Canadiens, to develop farm systems. And so that was Sam Pollock's job, to try to work for Frank Selke, who was the general manager of the Canadiens at the time, to build this system of players. Because at that time, there wasn't a draft the way there is now, a universal draft of all players who were 18 years old in the world. At that time, you signed up players as early as you could get them to sign with you, much like it still is with soccer in the UK and in other European countries. You wanted the 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old players to be with your teams with the hopes that they would then become professional players for you.
And this is how Scotty Bowman ends up becoming coach of the Junior Canadians and coach of the Peterborough Petes, a couple of hours east of where we are right now, at the age of 25, if you can imagine, and eventually gets his big break in 1966. The National Hockey League is expanding from 6 teams to 12 teams, and he gets hired as an assistant coach and general manager for the St. Louis Blues, and then 16 games into their first season, he takes over as head coach in the NHL. He's 34. If the plan was always, hopefully someday, to take over the Montreal Canadiens, why did he go to St. Louis?
Because there was no room with the Canadiens at the time. And I mean, Scotty had been this prodigy from around, as you say, sort of the age of 25. But ahead of him with the Canadiens, as coach was Toe Blake, and he was this legendary coach and formerly a great player with the Canadiens. So there was no room as coach with the Canadiens. In terms of senior positions outside of coaching, it was Frank Selke Sr., and then it became Sam Pollock. There was no room there. And so as Scotty rose very quickly, all of a sudden he ran out of ground. And so he was kind of going back and forth between being a junior coach in Hull, Ottawa, then in Peterborough, then becoming a scout, then going back to coaching some other junior teams in Montreal, coaching in the minor leagues for a short period of time. But essentially, he was going from this incredible prodigy to perhaps somebody who might never realize his possibilities. And so expansion comes along, and he is offered the job of assistant general manager and assistant coach in St. Louis. And so he takes the job. And then, again, you know, things happened. As you said, 16 games into the season. These expansion teams were given very little, and often into cities where there was very little support for hockey. St. Louis being one of them. There had been a long history in hockey in St. Louis, but not a successful history either on the ice or off the ice. So St. Louis starts poorly. The coach and general manager at the time, Lynn Patrick, decides that he's really too old for this job, and he tells Scotty, look, you take over. And it's taking over, you know, a team that doesn't have a lot of prospects. And so you've got to make of what you've got.
But because of the way they structured it, all the old original 6 teams in one division, all the new teams in another division, he takes them to the Stanley Cup 3 straight years.
That's right.
Pretty good.
That's right.
Now, you described this thing in the book, and when I read this, I could not believe it. There's a moment where there's an open job for the St. Louis Blues. And he gives the job to the guy who cracked his skull open years earlier,
That's right.
Jean-Guy Talbot.
That's right.
Why did he do that?
Because Scotty has this focus on what the task is. You know, that almost never is anything personal.
It doesn't get more personal than a guy taking your stick, you know,
That's right.
cracking your head open.
That's right. But what is more personal to him is the fact that this is the St. Louis Blues, and he's got a problem. He's got to have a roster of players that can compete to make the playoffs, let alone do more than that, in a city that is not exactly enamored with a hockey team. And so Jean-Guy Talbot is at the end of his career. He had won a number of Stanley Cups with the Canadiens. He could still skate. He could play defense, which was his natural position, but he could also play a little bit of forward because he could skate well enough to do that. And so Scotty had a need. Talbot was available, and so he went to him. And I mean, it is astonishing. And in fact, they literally have never addressed that moment in the junior game ever since that time. I mean, one thing that is interesting is that it was really about 4 or 5 years ago, is that on Scotty's birthday, Jean-Guy Talbot called him. And so, but they talk about the birthday. They talk about lots of other things. They have never talked about that moment and the fractured skull.
Amazing. 1971, his life changes. He goes back to Montreal. He gets the job that he was destined to do. He's 37 years old. The Habs draft a guy named Guy Lafleur, who played goalie for Montreal at this point.
Well, as of a short time earlier, yes, it was me.
I think that might have been you. On one occasion, he approaches you and says, "Do you think you're too good for this team?" What did he do that for?
Well, for good reasons. This would have been his second year on the team. I arrived slightly earlier than Scotty. I arrived in March of the year before, and we went on and ended up winning the Stanley Cup in ways that nobody expected. And then the following summer is when Scotty was hired. And so my first full year was Scotty's first full year with the Canadiens, and it was not a good year. We didn't do well. Scotty seemed very sour. He seemed defensive. And we lost out in the first round of the playoffs and everything. So then the second year begins, and now we're ready, and we're a good team. We're a very good team. And it was near the end of that year. At that particular point, post Jean Béliveau and pre the real arrival of Guy Lafleur as a superstar, that I was probably the most prominent player on the team, and maybe it got to me a bit, and so, when goals would go in, I'd slam my stick on the ice, and yes, it was about that maybe I could have done better, but maybe it was also delivered to, where were you? Why weren't you in position? What's wrong with you?
This is Scotty saying this?
No, this is me essentially saying it to my teammates.
I see.
And Scotty's watching this, and he's watching it, and it's not, he doesn't like it very much. And finally, after a certain buildup of time, he took me aside in practice, and that's when he said, "You think you're too good for this team?" And I was really mad. I mean, I was.
To swear at him?
No, I was just silent and seething. I didn't say anything. But the rest of the year, I was just mad. And,
well, let's show you a picture of happier times, shall we? Take a look at that monitor over there, because this is you guys in 1973, and you win the Stanley Cup, and you tell us in the book that he came up after the winning game and hugged you, and you tell us you did not hug him back.
Right.
Why not?
I was still mad.
From a year earlier?
No, this was the same year.
Oh, same year.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I was mad mostly because he was right, and that he caught me out in being right. But no, I mean he, and that was just after that was his first cup, and of course he was thrilled and coming back to Montreal and all of this happening. But I was still mad.
You called him finesseless in the book, the way he treated you and others, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Scotty is not an arm around the shoulder guy, and he never has been. And he can be very blunt, and he doesn't necessarily even know he's being blunt. I mean, he can be personally awkward. He doesn't like to have long conversations. Whenever we would talk during the course of a year, and that was, I think, the same with any player, and it would only be 3 or 4 times, the conversations would last about 30 seconds, 45 seconds. And they would start out as if they were going to last for 2 hours. I mean, it's like, wow, this is really good. We're really getting into something. And then it was as if the alarm clock went off, and the alarm clock was saying, look, we're starting to get a little too close here, starting to get a little too familiar. He may think I'm getting weak, and so he just starts, yeah, thanks, and we'll see you tomorrow. And that would be how he was. And he was that way right through the time I would have played in Montreal.
You two had an enormous amount of success together, but at the risk of being finesseless ourselves, we are going to show you something that I learned for the first time in this. Well, you know what? I'm going to save it. Again, let's watch the monitor. Sheldon, would you roll this clip, please?
Scotty Bowman making a change. Savard is on. Lemire is on. Now Lafleur goes to the corner. Here's Lafleur winding up for the shot. Lemire shoots it, and it's blocked by Tretiak. Another shot. Oh, what a save there on Lambert by Tretiak. Face off to the left of Tretiak. Jarvis against Schluchtop. Robinson tipped it in. Luchenko from the corner failed to clear, and Roberts whipped the shot into Tretiak. Now Wilson shoots it, and it's blocked. Zagankov coming out. Ahead to Shlukov. Shlukov over the line. There's the pass. Alexandria. He scores!
I feel so terrible showing that clip, but that made it 3-3. For those who don't know, that's considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest game ever played. It was a 3-3 final score between the Soviet Union and the Montreal Canadiens. It was New Year's Eve, 1975. And you say in the book, and I learned for the first time, in my memory, you write, it was the best game we ever played. I remember everyone playing at the top of their game, except me. It is my biggest regret in hockey. That is a big thing for a guy like you to say. And I wonder if, did you talk to Scotty after the game about it? Did he say anything to you about it? Anything at all?
No.
Nothing?
No, not at all. And I mean, it was a fantastic game. I mean, it truly was. I mean, it was a showdown game in almost the same way that the 72 series was a showdown moment. And both teams knew it, all the fans knew it. And when you get into a showdown game and that is played at a level like that, you have no right not to play up to the level of something that is so good. And that's why it's the game I would love to play again. And
wasn't your kind of game though, because he only got 13 shots. You needed more work.
No, but that's the goalie's job. The goalie's job is to deal with what you get, whatever it is. If you get 50, you deal with 50. If you have 13, you deal with 13. And so it was, it was that kind of a, and the thing that I learned for the first time from Scotty in doing this book, I could have guessed it a bit, but I heard it, is that really this game was exactly like, after this game, he realized that the team that he thought we were, the team that he thought we could be, all of a sudden it was there on the ice. He could see it, is that, yes, we are that team now. The Flyers, who had won the Cup for the 2 previous years, now we are absolutely ready to take them on. And it was the prototype game. And we delivered on that in that prototype game.
The general manager's job becomes open at Montreal, and Scotty doesn't get the job. And he's upset by that. And he leaves, he goes to Buffalo. He has a little bit of success in Buffalo, but he doesn't win the Stanley Cup. He moves on to Pittsburgh as director of player development. He wins Stanley Cups there. Mike Ilitch pays him triple to go to Detroit. He goes and takes over Detroit. He wins 3 more Stanley Cups in Detroit. When he won his last Stanley Cup as coach of the Red Wings, he celebrated on ice in a very different way that most coaches do. Right. What did he do?
Well, he put on his skates and to go out on the ice and to carry the cup with his skates on. And with somebody like Scotty, I mean, he's not a big gesture guy. He's somebody that would have thought about this for years, I'm sure. He would have planned it for months. And at the same time as he would be planning it, he would be saying to himself, I can't do this. I can't plan it. There's no way. If I plan it, then I'm thinking of something other than what I should be thinking about ahead of the moment. I need to be in that moment, plan for that moment. I cannot be thinking about things like putting on my skates and carrying a cup around before the cup is won. So it would have haunted him all the way right through to that moment. And it was so fun to listen to him describe it, and of how they're ahead, and they're gonna win, except their margin is still something not that great. Well, then they score and they're ahead by 2 goals, I think at this particular point, but there's still a minute to go. And you still can't, kind of really think about it. You can't leave the bench. Well, then there's a face-off with about 5 seconds to go. Now there's no way they can lose. That's the moment when he can leave the bench, go into the locker room. He's asked the trainer to sharpen the skates. The skates are ready, and now he puts them on to go out onto the ice. But then, of course, because he's Scotty, is that when they hand him the cup, ahead of when you normally might hand the cup to the coach, then he's not ready for it. And all he can see is the confetti coming down from the ceiling, the confetti that's on the ice, a 35-pound Stanley Cup, and he's got to skate around, carrying the cup above his head with the confetti on the ice, and he may fall on the ice, and it may be a disaster.
And he's how old at this point?
He's 68.
Oh my gosh, right. So that's a lot to think about.
That's a lot to think about.
This is what I love so much about the book is that the two of you spent so much time together as you picked his brains for all of the intricacies. And let's take a moment here and just talk about, in basketball, it's John Wooden, college basketball. Maybe in baseball, it's Tony La Russa or Connie Mack. In football, it's Bill Belichick or Don Shula. It's Scotty in hockey. And I'm wondering, after having spent this much time with him, do you see in all of those coaching geniuses, for lack of a better word, a common thread that they all have to have or they just can't be successful?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I think that that you start with the most basic. First you've got to really know a game. You really have to understand people, and a lot of those people are not really understood as persons. That Bill Belichick is not the most outgoing, kind of gracious-seeming person.
Until he hoists the Lombardi Trophy.
That's right.
Then he's a pleasant guy.
Then he's a pleasant guy. But I think what it is, really, and I did an article about, 7 or 8 years ago, and it was when the TV series House went off the air. And so I decided to write an article about House, about Scotty, and about Steve Jobs. And his biography from Walter Isaacson had come out not that much before. And I compared the three of them. And if it's like, why would you work for House? This is a miserable guy. Mm-hmm. And somebody who is demeaning. He brings you down. He makes fun of you. Why would you do that? Steve Jobs, reading page after page of the biography, it's like, Steve, you've won this time. You've won. You don't need to crush your opponent. Flip the page. Oh my God, he crushed his opponent again. You'd already won. Why would you crush people? And with Scotty. And that what all of them knew, what House knew, Jobs knew, and Scotty knew, is that all of the people that work for them, they want to be treated beautifully, an arm around the shoulder and slap on the back and all of that kind of stuff. But what they want more than anything is to win. That's what they want to win. That's what they want to do. So with House, you're a doctor there. You know that if you're around House, you're going to be tackling the most amazing cases, thinking things that you've never thought before, learning new stuff all the time. With Steve Jobs, you're going to be making the future. With Scotty, you have a chance to win the cup. And that's why you're there. And that's what all of them bring into that atmosphere. I'm sure that that's what Bill Belichick, brings into that atmosphere. The difference between, and I didn't think of it in the article to mention it, the difference between House and Jobs and Scotty is that House and Jobs were cruel. Scotty wasn't cruel. Scotty was tough. He was finesseless, but he wasn't cruel.
Absent from that answer is the fact that Scotty was lucky enough to have a lot of Hall of Famers playing on his team, yourself included. Is there any doubt in your mind that had Scotty Bowman not coached for the Montreal Canadiens, but rather had spent those 1970s coaching in Toronto, that we wouldn't be sitting here right now talking about him because he wouldn't have won any Stanley Cups and he wouldn't have been the guy we think of today? You got to have the horses.
You do have to have the horses, and Scotty was smart enough to know that. And Sam Pollock was smart enough, and the ownership in Montreal was smart enough. The ownership in Montreal understood that you need, if you're the owners of at that time, the two Canadian teams, the Canadians or the Leafs, is that it has to be, that hockey may be a business, those teams may be a business, but in terms of your day-to-day decisions, they have to be about winning the cup. They have to be about winning the Cup. You have no right to own these teams if that is not your central and core purpose. And so then you have somebody like Sam Pollock who can deliver you the players. And so to put them into Scotty Bowman's hands. And Sam could get Scotty the players, and Scotty knew that Sam would get him the players. And they were both in each other's hands, and they both knew that they were each in the right hands, in it. And so, yes, ownership can let you down. Ownership in Toronto let Toronto down for a long time through the Harold Ballard years.
Yep.
And you need the right coach and you need the right general manager in there. And if you do, and people like Scotty, you don't go to places where you know you don't have a chance to win because it's too crushing, because you're too much about the opportunity of winning the prize at the end. So he goes to those places where, that's why he went to Detroit. With Mike Ilitch, he was the right owner, to be the coach for and to be kind of the coach plus. And the thing that I found fascinating, I sort of knew it, but appreciated it far more, when I was talking with Scotty, is those Detroit teams. They were made up of Hall of Famers. And, so many great players. The team that Scotty selected as the most, the best of those Detroit teams, the 2002 team, had 9 Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers on that team, and another who will be. But what was different about him coaching that team is that only one of those players, and it would be Nick Lidstrom, the defenseman, was still in his Hall of Fame-like years. All of the others were of their post-best time in the NHL. And he had to find a way of piecing them together. Former captains, best players on teams, top 10 in scoring, always on the power play, always in the critical moments. You've only got one puck. And how do you put and piece all of them together? And that was maybe one of his most interesting coaching jobs, is to, if they are used to 22 minutes of ice time, they're not going to win if they get 22 minutes of ice time. He's got to give them 16. They have to accept 16. They were willing to accept 16 so long as the others only got 16. And then together they realized that this was their chance. Instead of being sour about getting less ice time, they were thrilled at the possibility of one more cup that otherwise they would never achieve.
And they got the rings to prove it.
Got it.
We got a minute left, Ken. Let's do this. He's still involved in hockey, right? He's 86 years old and he's still involved in hockey.
Yes,
What's he up to?
He watches all the time. Like last, the game in Tampa Bay with the Leafs, he would have been there. Absolutely would have been there. He goes to almost all of the Tampa Bay home games because he lives in Florida in the winter. He watches the NHL Network, watches games, talks to his buddies on the phone. But the most interesting thing I find about him is that when he's home in Buffalo in the summer, USA Hockey has big camps there for under 19-year-old players, the 16s, 17s, and 18s. They're there for 5 days, each of them. Scotty will be there for about 3 days of each of the 3 different camps. He goes there and he watches as if he's not Scotty Bowman. The others who are there, they're scouts of NHL teams, scouts of colleges, assistant coaches of college teams, and he's there watching, and he watches with the same kind of freshness of look, the same kind of sense of excitement over somebody who does something special. That's why he could win cups 28 years apart, because he is not the expert that once you see something and know something, it's all over, you already know everything. He watches every next game, every next moment, as if there is something to learn. And that's why he is still incredibly interesting.
And his son is the GM of the Chicago Blackhawks, so he advises his son still.
He does.
There you go. Sheldon, in our last 10 seconds, bring up that last picture there, okay? We want to show this. There's a happy moment. There's Scotty in the middle, and that fella on the left I think once was Prime Minister of the country, might be the father of the current PM, and I recognize the guy on the right as well, who has been our guest for the last half hour. You remember that moment?
I do. It would have been in the playoffs, and it would have been one of those 4 cups.
That reminds me of Jean Drapeau's line. Go ahead, you say it.
Well, Jean Drapeau, the mayor of Montreal, came to issue a press release the morning after the night before when we would win a cup. And the press release just read simply, "The parade will follow its usual route."
I don't know if that's fabulous or arrogant or, as a Leaf fan, just heartbreaking, but anyway.
It's just information.
It's just information, okay. Scotty, A Hockey Life Like No Other is a tremendous read, and Ken Dryden is its author and our guest. Thanks so much, Ken.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.